Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Inside the Mind of a Social Entrepreneur. I am joined here today by Mekha Thachankary, co-founder Guardians of Dreams. Defying the conventions in India, Mekha decided to bet on her social entrepreneurial mindset and take the challenge of helping underprivileged children in India. Her vision of creating a just society that provides equal opportunity for all children led her to set up her first social venture, Guardians of Dreams. They aim to ensure that every child in an orphanage receives the care, resources, and support to achieve positive adult outcomes. Welcome to Summit Up Mekha. We are all eager to hear what you have to say.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. And thank you, Jacob. Thank you, NSRCEL, for this opportunity. Good afternoon again. My name is Mekha, and I am a social entrepreneur committed to ensuring that vulnerable children in India grow up in a safe and nurturing environment. My organization, Guardians of Dreams, does this by partnering with existing childcare institutions in the community, and we upgrade and transform the quality of care practices provided by these institutions. While vulnerable children and their care is a topic that I am strongly passionate about and have dedicated my life towards, another passion that I adore speaking about is the impact of women leadership in our community today. And so I am very excited to be speaking to you all. Preparing for this talk has been wonderful because it not only gave me an opportunity to stop and reflect on my own entrepreneurial journey, but also about how being a woman added so much of flavor to it. And so from that introspection, I was able to distill a couple of tips or advice or whatever you'd like to call it, that I think would have really helped the younger version of me to hear when she started her entrepreneurship journey. And so I hope that it would be the same for all of you. So let's begin. The first tip is basically to embrace your passion. If there is one thing that is going to fuel your work through this social impact journey, it is your passion. But the ironic thing about passion is that it's not always logical. I have chosen to dedicate my life to helping 2 crore vulnerable children in our country to have the required care, resources, and support to grow into becoming positive adults. Now, keep in mind, 2 crore is currently the population size of the continent of Australia. I cannot tell you the number of times where people would scoff at me regarding this and ask me to be more realistic. But that's the thing about being an entrepreneur. It is about imagining a world that isn't real in our current reality. It's about imagining and manifesting and working so hard towards this vision that one day people will not be able to remember that a world where all its children are not taken care of even existed. And also remember that as a social entrepreneur, you have actively chosen to solve other people's problems. And in all probability, people will not see the impact of what you are trying to change anytime soon. So hold on to your passion, protect it violently from all the naysayers, and I assure you that you will have fun on your journey. The second tip is to design for scale. As a social entrepreneur, you must design for scale from day one, simply because the need for your solution is so large. Take the problem of helping vulnerable children. It can be solved in one way if I were to only see that there were only 3 children at risk. I would take them home, provide them shelter, and raise them based on my instincts, much like my mom did. However, when you talk about this problem being of a size as large as 2 crore, my solution design would definitely have to change. My house is not nearly big enough to accommodate those numbers. And I would need to look at systems that can store and process data about these children and design solutions accordingly. Suddenly, you're talking about the kind of scale that would essentially throw every single process that you would design for a small number like 3 and would need to build into design the ability to tackle 2 crore right from the start. Therefore, to build a social enterprise that can operate at scale, that can operate at a scale required to solve social problems, scalability should be built into the basic design of your solution. Your processes, models, strategies would need to be derived keeping scale in mind. Tip number 3, reimagining labels. So I grew up in a well-to-do family in South India. If I had to conform to what was expected from the typical South Indian girl at that time, I would probably be a doctor or an engineer, probably married at the age of 23, and move to US because for some reason that seems to be the goal for everybody. And at my current age of 31, I would possibly be looking after my baby number 2. Now, don't get me wrong, this plan or this world is wonderful for some people, but it's just that it's not the only option. What you need to realize is that there is no one way of doing things or being someone. What you need to figure out is what way works for you. What are the labels that you are currently holding on to? And what is the attached definition of that label that you seem to be conforming to? Do you want to keep being that? Or do you want to reimagine another definition for yourself? For example, I attach myself to the label of being a woman. But according to society, when does a girl become a woman? When she gets her first period. The only difference between the two is that one cannot have a child and the other can. So the very definition of being a woman is with child. Interesting. But here is why being aware of your labels is even more critical for us entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is uncharted territory. And while as entrepreneurs, we are constantly navigating our way through it, our labels affect, or the labels that we're holding on to affect our judgment, our choices, our opportunities, and our power of understanding and imagining. So really be aware of all the labels that you're holding on to, and perhaps be picky about the ones that you want to associate and conform to, because these are the tools that you are going to have on your journey of entrepreneurship. So what if I took that definition of a woman that we discussed before, which was can bear child, and reimagined it to be something else like a creator or a nurturer? I created an organization and I nurture it every day so that it can reach or accomplish my vision for it. I am tapping into what is wonderfully beautiful about being a woman and using it to amplify social impact. Tip number 4, embracing your feminine. When you think of entrepreneurship, you think of words or traits like leadership and ambition, aggressiveness, conquering, being brave, words that are often connected to masculinity. In a world where masculine traits are rewarded, there were many times that I felt suffocated, lost in terms of how I could contribute. But what I have learned and continue to hold close to my heart is that feminine traits are often understated, but are incredibly invaluable. Intuition, listening, patience, kindness, sensing, nurturing are all supremely powerful feminine traits that create productive teams, improve team health, build and manage long-term relationships. Let's take decision making, for example. Emotional and rational decision making have been pitted against each other for decades. There is this book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And in that, he describes two separate systems of thinking. an emotional and intuitive process, which happens first, followed by a slower and more effortful process of rational logic. This slower and more analytical process is often seen as superior. But when making decisions, which to be frank will always include humans, you cannot discount emotions because humans and emotions go hand in hand. And so we cannot make decisions based on rationality alone. If you search for women's intuition on Google, one of the first explanations that show up is that in this article where I think the husband was speaking about his wife, he says that women are said to possess a superior intuition, an almost psychic and somewhat frightening knack of knowing what others are feeling and thinking. Experts say that this intuition is based on an ability to read facial expressions and body language. As entrepreneurs, we are constantly making fast-paced decisions in what in that meeting where you're pitching for funding. You need to continuously tweak the pitch according to the funder's response, which is not just the words that he says, but it could even be a twitch in his eye or a look here or a look there. The ability to be able to read that person more accurately is key to presenting or pitching in a way that you can win that deal. So if some of you here were in the same were or are in the same predicament as me, confused about whether being feminine is useful in leadership, my advice to you is to embrace that energy and discover how work is going to change for you. The fifth bit of advice and the final bit of advice that I have is sisterhood is power. I have been blessed to be surrounded by incredible women during my journey. I have had the privilege of being mentored by older women who have already trailblazed before me and from whom I can learn and get advice from when I'm stuck. I am part of wonderful cohorts of fellow women leaders who are all trying to move mountains in their fields. And from their friendship, I derive so much courage to keep venturing into this uncharted territory of social entrepreneurship. Other women that I have been really blessed with was my mother and my grandmothers, who, even if they were at home or at work, were constantly challenging the status quo. And any sort of skills that I learned in terms of understanding people, taking into consideration what people required, were all from this fine heritage of women that I belong to. So whether you're a homemaker or an entrepreneur or provider, women are connected through this common fabric of sisterhood, which is so enabling in all our journeys. So I'm going to stop here because, to be honest, I could go on for hours talking about women entrepreneurs. But I want to end this by saying congratulations to all of us. We are all now part of a world where young girls today know what it's like to have women leaders in the community, something that when I was small, I never saw. Right now, for these young girls, women leaders are not an impossibility. It is literally the normal. And thanks to all of us, we are able to provide that world for them. So my ask for all of you is to embrace your womanhood, speak about your journey to people, and together let's bring more feminine energy into this world that desperately needs it today. Thank you. So we're gonna, yeah. So I think there are questions. Maybe I can just take that. I'm sorry. Yeah. So a question that's come up is that what are some students who are looking to enter into the social space to keep in mind? I love this question because I myself started in the social space when I was in college, actually. So one of the first things that I would tell everybody is to definitely volunteer. Volunteering was what first propelled me into the sector. Um, and to be honest, I think everybody, when they start their journey, they have this very, I just want to do something good, but they're not really sure what's the good that you want to do, right? I was blessed enough to know that I wanted to work with children. So I went and started volunteering at children's homes right from college. But even then, I was thinking, how could I contribute? Because is it just in terms of, let's say, teaching? And I'm not a great teacher, right? So, but when I went there down on ground and I saw what children's homes were like and the kind of problems that they were going to, I got attracted to the fact that if I could bring more money into the sector, the it would be quite transformative for the sector and all. So even when I was in college, I started organizing events. I started raising funding for the homes that I was working in. And that's when I realized that, yes, I want to work in the development sector, and that's going to be my core identity, but my functional identity is going to be fundraising. My functional identity is going to be community mobilizing, and my functional identity is going to be talking about the challenges that I'm seeing on ground. So it's important to know that you have to also think about what your functional identity should be, and that should also overlap with your interests. And one more reason why I think that it's important to volunteer is that volunteering gives you so much of exposure that four walls in a classroom will not be able to give it to you. So I strongly advise for students to volunteer. Another question is, okay, what does scale mean to you? Is there a trade-off between depth of impact and the number of beneficiaries touched? Oh, it's a very powerful question. And I think not just in the nonprofit space, for-profit space, the debate between scale versus impact is something that is very large. So scale is very important to me, because I think as an entrepreneur, I am not I don't want to help 20 children or 100 children or 1,000 children. As an entrepreneur, as my vision is to change the sector. My vision is to provide a safe space for all children in the country. And so even in what I was talking about, scale is very key to what I want to do, right? And scale is something that I need to decide from day one. But at the same time, so where I think that scale is important is that you need to consider it in the beginnings, that you can design your program to deliver scale. But then there's that whole question on when do you actually scale, right? So I think that if you are at that point of time where you need to sort of see that, is your program something that is deep enough for you? Is it deep enough to create, to change things for your beneficiaries? And once you are completely sure of that, that is when you need to scale. Are there any words of advice to women who took a break for their career and who want to return to the development sector? I actually am one of those women. I think when I was making the transition between for-profit and the non-profit, I was basically deeply not content with working in a corporate. And so I decided to take a year off, do my GMAT, and try to plan my life and see what's next. I don't believe that. I think when you're working in the nonprofit sector, and when I say that passion is what really fuels you, if passion is something that is continuing to fuel you, that is a major asset for the nonprofit sector. So the other bits are just sort of just whatever is rusty, just getting it back up to speed. That's it. But apart from that, a break is totally fine, and as long as you still have that passion to create impact. How does the dynamics change for a social impact entrepreneur vis-a-vis any other profit-driven sector? Oh, I don't think the passion is very different. I think for the outside world, or the masculine world, as I like to call it, where people value or judge success based on the money involved, I think maybe there, you see like an imbalance, but for a social entrepreneur, our success and our metrics is in terms of how much impact that we're creating, right? So it's just, the difference is just what the metric is. And for any social entrepreneur who has chosen this lifestyle, yes, money is very important to us, but at the same time, what drives us more is the number of people that we are able to change outcomes for, or how much funding, at least for me, it's how much funding I can bring into the sector, right? That doesn't, so that doesn't change anything when you, for a nonprofit person either. Is there any words of advice that you feel could have really impacted you if someone had given it to you at an early stage? Yes. This actually, yeah, this that is. I think one of my mentors who I met in one of my fellowships, and this was at a time where I was very confused about what I want to do in life. And I went to her and I just I was like, oh, I need to do this and I haven't done it, and I'm supposed to be this and I'm not that person, and what's happening? And she just sat me down and she just said, Mekha, who says you have to be these things, right? Who says you should have figured out things at the age of 30? Who says that you have to have been this person at another age? Who says you have to do it this way? And when she questioned me on that, I realized that nobody's actually said these things to me. There are just so many of these implicit expectations that we have just imbibed from the community that I don't think that I realized that I don't have to be that. So the fact that she says who says, and she challenged me to challenge my own assumptions. And this was advice that I got, much later in life, like in the last 2-3 years. And I really wish that I had it when I was a kid, because, or a young adult, because, and if you speak to most young adults right now, they're all going through this thing where they feel like they should have figured out their career at the age of 23. So this is also my advice when I meet youngsters who are also in that same space trying to figure it out. Says that who says you need to be these things? So that's a piece of advice that I thought was very, very useful. As a social impact entrepreneur, is there any certain kind of change that you wish to see in this space? Yes. The one change that I really want to see in the space, and the one change that I'm really passionate to also bring in, is to bring in more funding into the sector. I think that a lot of people, and I meet so many people who all want to contribute to the sector, but are hesitant to jump into it full time because of the lack of funding, right? So everybody thinks that nonprofits do not get, people who work in the nonprofit space do not get paid, and it's not a viable career for them, which in some ways are true. And if you really think about it, if I went to Harvard and invested in my education so highly, why should I take like an 80% cut and work in a nonprofit space? It makes total sense, right? So the idea for me is that if people could invest in teams and invest in building institutions that are capable of creating change, I think we would be able to attract the best talent from across the world into the sector. And why not, right? This sector is the one that needs the most amount of help. It literally does help and does contribute to impacting a society that we are all living in. The best people and the best talent should be working in our sector. So the one thing that could be a massive game changer to all, like any cause that any of the social developing the social entrepreneurs are working in, is just the best kind of talent, being able to attract and sustain the best kind of talent in the society and in the organization. Yeah, so I think I got all the questions. Yeah. So if there aren't any more, thank you so much, NSRCEL. I think it's okay, no more. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for listening to this talk. And I'm just going to pass it back to Jacob. If you are interested to connect with me, my email ID is Mekha, MEKHA, @godreams.org. Please feel free to send me an email. Thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mekha. That was such a lovely talk. I'm sure you encouraged a lot of other women to take up the development sector. I think you renewed a lot of energy in that space. I love the way you answered the questions. I think it was very topical. Thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us today at Summit Up. Wish you all the very best.